But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it. And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last week.
No one expected it. Out of nowhere, conservative firebrand Charlie Kirk just dropped a $100 million lawsuit on The View, and he's naming names. But what made this more than just another media beef was what happened next. While the headlines were focused on the dollar signs, The View's own Sunny Hostin was visibly shaken, her voice cracking during a live broadcast, struggling to keep her composure. This wasn't just a PR nightmare anymore. It felt personal. And for a show built on bold opinions and louder arguments, this moment was something else entirely. But how did it get to this point? And why does Charlie Kirk think he can take down one of the most powerful talk shows on TV? This wasn't Kirk's first run-in with The View. For months, he's accused the show of deliberately smearing conservative voices, especially his own. But things escalated last year during a fiery episode where the hosts brought up Turning Point USA, Kirk's youth-focused political group, and made on-air claims linking it to hate groups. It wasn't long before the show was forced to backtrack, with Sunny Hostin reading out a legal disclaimer, lies on air, clarifying that the accusations had no direct evidence. But to Kirk, that legal note wasn't enough. In fact, he claimed it proved his point, that shows like The View can toss out serious accusations without accountability, then quietly walk them back when nobody's paying attention. Behind the scenes, Kirk's team began building a case, gathering transcripts, monitoring coverage, and waiting for the right moment. That moment came when The View brought up Turning Point again. This time, Kirk says, with even less caution. According to the lawsuit, the show made malicious and knowingly false statements aimed at damaging his reputation and the organization's ability to operate. And while Kirk has never shied away from controversy, this time he wasn't going to settle for tweets and podcast rants. This time, he was going to court. But if Kirk's strategy was to rattle the cage, it worked. Because what happened next didn't just catch producers off guard. It caught Sunny Hostin herself in the emotional crosshairs. When Charlie Kirk finally pulled the trigger, it wasn't a media stunt. It was a full-blown legal war, filed in a federal court. The lawsuit alleges that The View not only defamed Kirk and his organization, Turning Point USA, but did so intentionally, knowing the statements were false or made with reckless disregard for the truth. The price tag? A staggering $100 million in damages. The core of the lawsuit zeroes in on multiple broadcast segments where The View allegedly tied Turning Point to extremist elements and made what Kirk's legal team calls grossly irresponsible characterizations. The suit claims these remarks weren't off-the-cuff opinions. They were part of a broader, coordinated media smear that damaged Turning Point's funding, event attendance, and even led to threats against students involved in their chapters. What's more, the lawsuit singles out Sunny Hostin for the role she played in delivering the now infamous legal notes on air, public retractions framed as clarifications, but according to Kirk's team, read with sarcasm and disdain that only fueled the damage. They argue that instead of correcting the record, The View tried to play both sides, throwing out heavy accusations, then legally shielding themselves with carefully worded apologies that came too late. But that wasn't all. Kirk's legal filing also hinted at internal communications and leaked emails that may suggest the show's producers were aware that some claims were shaky, but went ahead anyway because, as the filing puts it, the political benefit outweighed the legal risk. If that's true, it could open up The View to even more legal scrutiny and possibly depositions that force high-profile co-hosts to testify under oath. And while some called the lawsuit a publicity move, others pointed out that Kirk has been strategic, not impulsive. This wasn't a hot-headed reaction. It was a slow burn, months in the making. His legal team didn't just fire shots. They came armed with timestamps, footage, expert witnesses, and a playbook to take on corporate media head-on. Still, it wasn't the lawsuit that got viewers talking. It was what happened live on national TV when the pressure reached Sunny Hostin and the mask started to slip. The tension had been building for weeks, but no one expected Sunny Hostin to break down on air. It started subtly. During a heated discussion about the lawsuit, Sunny was reading yet another legal disclaimer, something viewers had seen before. But this time, her tone was different. Her voice trembled slightly. She paused more than once. And for the first time, there was no witty comeback or sharp pushback, just a quiet, uneasy silence that settled across the table. Then, it happened. As co-hosts debated whether the lawsuit had any real teeth, Sunny's composure cracked. Her hands shook slightly as she shuffled her note cards. Her voice faltered mid-sentence. And when the camera cut to a wide shot, you could see it. Tears welling up in her eyes quickly blinked away. She didn't leave the stage. She didn't storm off. But viewers noticed something had shifted. She wasn't just reacting to a story. She had become the story. Some fans rushed to defend her, saying the pressure of non-stop scrutiny had clearly taken a toll. Others speculated that behind the scenes, legal threats were causing real fear among the show's staff. After all, if Kirk's legal team followed through with depositions, Sunny could be called to testify, and every word she'd ever said about him might be played back in court. But critics weren't so kind. Online, the moment went viral. Clips of the emotional segment flooded social media. Some labeled it a calculated move, a way to gain sympathy before things got worse legally. Others accused the show of using Sunny's visible distress to shift focus away from the actual lawsuit. On Reddit and X, formerly Twitter, debates exploded. Was this a breaking point or a carefully planned play? Either way, the damage was done. What had started as a political grudge had just turned into a personal crisis. And the real question now wasn't whether The View could beat the lawsuit, but whether its hosts could survive the spotlight. And as cameras faded to commercial, no one could have predicted what came next. Because this wasn't the first time Charlie Kirk clashed with the media, and it definitely wouldn't be the last. If Sunny's emotional moment caught people off guard, the backlash that followed hit like a wrecking ball. Within hours, clips of the segment had racked up millions of views across TikTok, YouTube, and X. Conservative creators jumped on it instantly, framing it as a meltdown and calling it proof that The View was finally cracking under pressure. Some even labeled it a public unraveling, accusing the show of being unable to back up its bold claims once the legal heat turned real. On the other side, liberal commentators called the moment raw and human, arguing that Sunny was being unfairly dragged into a political fight that was never supposed to get this personal. But that didn't stop the wave. #ViewGate started trending, and with it came a flood of old clips, previous jabs at Kirk, past missteps from Sunny, even unrelated hot takes from other hosts, now resurfacing to paint a picture of bias, recklessness, and hypocrisy. Behind the scenes, tension was boiling over too. Insiders reported unease among the production team. According to one leak, there were internal arguments about whether to address the lawsuit on air again or quietly bury it and move on. But with Kirk's legal team demanding retractions and hinting at potential subpoenas, there was no easy way out. Even among The View's own cast, the cracks were showing. One insider claimed Joy Behar was visibly annoyed by how much airtime the lawsuit was taking up, while another report suggested producers had to cut entire segments after Sunny's on-air slip-up just to keep the show's tone under control. Meanwhile, conservative media ran wild. Fox News devoted multiple primetime minutes to dissecting the lawsuit, with pundits asking whether The View had finally crossed a line that could cost them not just money, but legitimacy. Meghan McCain, a former co-host with no love lost for her old seatmates, tweeted that the show was getting exactly what it asked for. But if the lawsuit and media frenzy weren't enough, there was something even more dangerous looming for The View. Because Kirk's case wasn't just about damages, it was about setting a precedent. And if he succeeded, the entire landscape of live TV opinion shows could change forever. Backstage at The View, the energy shifted fast, from defiant to defensive. According to insiders, the producers were immediately forced into crisis management mode, holding emergency meetings with legal teams, publicists, and network executives. ABC, the network behind The View, hadn't dealt with a lawsuit this public and this costly in years. And $100 million isn't just a headline, it's a financial threat that corporate lawyers take very seriously. So what are they planning? One option reportedly on the table is a formal on-air retraction, a direct apology or clarification from the show's hosts, possibly accompanied by legal language carefully crafted to avoid further liability. But here's the catch. Doing that could look like an admission of guilt. And with Charlie Kirk already framing the lawsuit as a fight for truth and accountability, any backpedaling would only strengthen his narrative. Another strategy being floated: say nothing. Ride out the storm, let legal teams battle it out behind closed doors, and hope the media cycle moves on. But that's risky too. In today's digital world, silence often looks like guilt, or worse, arrogance. And with social media keeping this story alive 24/7, The View might not have the luxury of waiting it out. There's also growing pressure from inside the building. Some staffers reportedly feel blindsided, claiming they weren't warned how serious the Kirk situation had become until the lawsuit hit. Others are calling for internal reviews, worried the show's off-the-cuff style is turning into a legal liability. One unnamed source told a media outlet, "If we're not careful, we'll talk ourselves into courtrooms more than conversations." And while the co-hosts have stayed relatively quiet in the aftermath, one thing is certain: the network's next move won't just be about protecting The View. It'll be about protecting daytime TV's entire model of unscripted opinion, live debate, and unfiltered hot takes. Because if Charlie Kirk wins this case, it could redraw the boundaries of what shows like The View, The Talk, and even Real Time with Bill Maher are allowed to say and get away with. But maybe the most unexpected consequence? This lawsuit has already turned into something bigger than just Kirk, a talk show. It's become a symbol of the deepening war between conservative media and mainstream platforms. And what happens next might just shift the entire playing field. To some, this might look like just another tabloid feud, another media figure suing a talk show to grab headlines. But beneath the surface, something much bigger is unfolding. Charlie Kirk's lawsuit isn't just about reputation, it's about reclaiming the narrative. In recent years, conservative figures like Kirk have positioned themselves as the underdogs in a media landscape they say is stacked against them. And for their audience, The View isn't just a talk show. It's a symbol of elite media bias, of smugness, of unchecked power disguised as progressive commentary. So when Kirk filed that lawsuit, it wasn't just legal. It was political theater with real stakes, and it's working. His followers see this as a power move. They're calling it a strike back against cancel culture, a challenge to the mainstream platforms that they believe can insult, mock, or label anyone they disagree with and face zero consequences. In Kirk's world, this lawsuit isn't about defamation. It's about finally holding them accountable. But the effect goes both ways. For The View and daytime talk shows like it, this moment is a wake-up call. It's no longer enough to rely on legal disclaimers or last-minute clarifications. The audience is changing, the culture is shifting, and the internet never forgets. Every sentence, every soundbite can be clipped, shared, and used as evidence in both the court of law and the court of public opinion. And that's where the real danger lies, because no matter who wins the case, the fallout is already reshaping how media personalities speak on air. It's forcing producers to think twice before leaning into controversy for clicks. And it's sending a chilling message to anyone who built their brand on bold opinions. You might be next. This isn't just Kirk versus The View. This is the front line of a deeper battle between free speech and defamation, between opinion and accountability, between new media and old. And no matter where you stand, one thing is clear. This fight is far from over. What started as one lawsuit could be the beginning of a tidal wave. Since Charlie Kirk's $100 million legal bombshell landed, other conservative figures have reportedly started reviewing old segments of popular talk shows, podcasts, and live streams, looking for moments that cross the line from opinion into potential defamation. Behind closed doors, media watchdogs are already warning networks. This case could set precedent. And it's not just talk shows that should be worried. Several YouTubers, political commentators, and even podcast hosts have reached out to lawyers, asking whether they might have been defamed in the past, and whether it's finally time to push back. There's growing speculation that if Kirk's lawsuit gains traction in court, we could see a domino effect. Lawsuits against mainstream outlets from internet creators, counter lawsuits from TV networks against online personalities. A new era where no one with a platform is immune from legal fire. Even media law experts, who once brushed this off as a stunt, are starting to admit that if a federal judge sides with Kirk even partially, it could redraw the line between protected opinion and actionable slander on live television. One attorney went viral for saying, if this case lands right, The View might not be the only show writing checks next year. And then there's the political angle. Politicians and activists are watching this case closely. Some believe Kirk's move could open the door for public figures to legally strike back in ways that were once thought off limits. Others fear it's a step towards silencing dissent through financial warfare, where the threat of lawsuits chills open debate. Either way, the message is clear. This isn't just about what was said on The View. It's about what can be said on any platform by anyone without being dragged into court. And the aftershocks, they're just getting started.